All right, so just as an example, so when my husband and I did this, this was one of his top values. And quite frankly, it's not one of mine. Seriously, I wanted, and most of my day looked like unstructured play and exploration with my boys. We were on adventures. That's what we did. We had the house torn apart. There were forts in our living room. There were, when I left tonight, literally, my bed was taken apart, and I had made a huge fort for them. I love that. Now, I knew when my husband got home, he was going to be like, so I warned him, and I let him know. I said, it's easy to put back. It will take 10 minutes. So it's not a problem, but here's what our mutual value came from after having this total opposite. I mean, we are on totally opposite ends of the spectrum. So unconditional love is a concept that's pretty big and pretty vague and but for us, it was that even though I don't keep a perfect house, and I don't care about keeping a perfect house, it's more important for me to be playing with my boys. I know that it is important for him to have a clean house, so he can do the dishes if he likes when he gets home. And that's awesome. That sounds kind of snotty. But I don't deliberately make a pigsty of the house, but I don't spend my time washing dishes. And the other thing is, I get someone else to spend their time to do it. So I pay someone to come in and take care of the house. Actually, I don't, he does. Because that's what he values. So that I can be with my boys and have fun with them. And I don't have to be scrubbing my toilets and washing the dishes and doing things that are not important to me. I don't value that. I do enough because I want my husband to be happy and I want that handled. So we came up with what we could do. And there are always solutions like that. There should never be a situation where someone's making the other person wrong for what they are or who they are or what's important to them. And that's why unconditional love was what we came up with. And really, sometimes we have to go and step into that practicing presence place and look at our intention with unconditional love. And that is, you know what? You have to admire that. I mean, the tent was pretty amazing, what we did, right? So that's where this comes in. And so when we take that down a little further, we start understanding things. Health and well-being in emotion, in physical health, as well as spiritual health, these are huge for me. They're pretty important to my husband, but he truly does not value them like I do. So because I'm kind of the main caregiver for my boys, meaning, I homeschool them, I cook every meal, we have allergy situation. I personally am celiac, so I don't have gluten. I can't go to restaurants because it's a serious disease. And I'm spending 3.5 hours in the kitchen. I value cooking my own meals, and I value exceptional health. And that requires me to invest my time and energy and money in cooking the best foods that I can for my family and nourishing my family in not only food-wise, but in what I give them as far as things. So I am very much interested in nurturing their brains and their bodies in a more natural way, as opposed to sticking them in front of a TV or sticking in front of digital types of things. And my husband's not that way. He's in front of a computer all day long, and when he comes home, he wants to be in front of a computer. And that's okay, because we have this, but he sees the effects on the children. And he's not willing to do it for himself, but he's willing to let me stand up and say, no, these boys are not going to be in front of a movie. It takes like 5 days to detox from watching, an innocuous movie, what we think is innocuous, but they're all, dramatizing it. And kids cannot process this. We talk about this in the workshop. It's an entire piece, one night on this, because There are so many studies on the effects of the brain and the development of the child's brains and how media affects it, specifically electronic media, okay, electronics. So these are important things to understand. I don't have this perfect house, this perfect life. I'm here standing in this place, implementing and practicing pilot every day. I'm piloting my way through parenting every moment, every day, and piloting my way through parenting with a partner who is completely in a different opposition to me on things that are not necessarily deal breakers. So they're not deal breakers for us, but unconditional love brings us back to what we commonly value, and health. The other is, and you had touched on this, so kindness, compassion, all of this goes in there, right? Trustworthy, reliability, all of that goes in there. It's reliable, and how you speak to one another, how you treat each other. Okay, these are important. And then the other piece, there was one more that I wanted to say: kindness, compassion, trustworthy, and competence. So it is really important to be competent for both me and my husband, in that if you're going to do something, you want to do it well. So we instill that not only for ourselves, but in our children. That's what we want to see. We don't dabble in things. I commit to 90 days. My son wants to play the violin. Okay, good. It's not something you're just going to pick up, and when it gets too hard, you're going to throw it away. It's a 90-day commitment. We've agreed upon that, and we established that competence can be found within 90 days, usually. We get that. And so as opposed to getting onto the next fad and the next this, and because Joey's doing it, I want to do it, So that was established early. And then this is another big piece for us. Creativity. We value being creative, creativity, art. So instead of using a lot of manufacturing of TV, for me it's a big time waster, and not to be on a soapbox, but children have enormous capacity to create. Whether it's cooking, whether it is creating on a piece of paper, whether it's creating in their imaginations and letting it take fruition out into the world. And I think that it's a disservice to set up our children in a way that precludes them from coming into their own creativity, their own unique voice, and expressing their unique voice. That has to be allowed. So for me, when I was sitting down working with my husband on this, he had concerns because he wanted things a certain way. There's no way he would have been on board with homeschooling had I not done a very creative process of communicating what the boys would be able to do as a result of being homeschooled. I have a 5-year-old who is an enormously gifted artist. And the majority of his time is spent creating in art. Now he learns from that. He learns through that. And that's a gift that I can give my children, and my husband can recognize that now. And so this is a really beautiful way to establish a family and allow for things that are not important to fall by the wayside. Okay? There's clearly going to be deeper things that you get into, and as the workshop unfolds, we get a little deeper and give the opportunity to go deeper. And then, of course, at home, this is something that I recommend. You re-look at these. You look at these. This is 7 years that has been in the making for us. And when it's established, you have a common ground of agreement that you can always come back to. It is part of that practicing presence. It is part of that setting the intention. It is part of course correction. It is part of responding rather than reacting. And it is a gift you give your children as they grow up, because they can have that place of self-soothing instead of seeking something outside of them or looking for the answer from somebody else to tell them what they should think, they should do, they should be, they should have. No, they need to know that they and their voice is vital and that they can speak up, they can stand and hold that position of their unique selves. And that's my personal mission. Not only as a woman, as a business person, but also my lifetime mission is to empower the individuals to stand in their unique voice and confidently express that. I think I've covered pretty much everything, and I really wanted to see that there are two sides to this. I have never seen in the hundreds of families I've worked with where everybody is like exactly what it is unless somebody is truly giving up their true self. And there is always going to be a way for those both needs to get met in a true way, in a true fulfilling way without destroying the other's unique voice. And that's an important piece that I wanted to make sure got across. Okay, yes, I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to get rid of this right now, and then we'll come back to the piece on love. Because you mentioned love as a key value. And this is going to go into the number one bonding strategy. I teach this as well in some of my free workshops because it's so important. And sometimes this is really more for, I originally did this because there were some parents that had teens and there was a situation with lack of bonding and their peers were not acceptable to the parents, but it was creating more and more of a gap between the connection. And so what we started with was this. So we went back to this piece because that's the fundamental piece. What's bonding? I mean, bonding essentially, you look at this, so take two magnets, and if they're repelling each other, they're certainly not bonding, but you bring that frequency and shift that magnetic energy, right? And you've got bonding. And that's the tool, that's the key. However, you've got this piece, this mass, where it's another person, or it could be anything, right? So this is just kind of just science, but I'm going to say, so here's a mass and here's a mass. And they're either repulse, or they're attracting. So, how does this relate to bonding? Well, what attracts what?
The opposite, plus and minus.
Now see, that is a false idea. Opposites do not attract. Like attracts like. The underlying frequency attracts. That's what's so interesting. So let's say, for example, and here's where we get very conceptual. There is a frequency. Let's say, you know what, I'm going to use this different analogy because it's really popular right now, the 5 languages of love. He's talking about how everybody has their way of getting their love need met. You know, it's not a bad idea, and clearly because millions of people are buying the book, but there's some missing key pieces to it for me. And here's what it is. Some of those ideas are manufactured in the childhood, meaning they've been forced to think that they're getting love by being given something. So later in their adult life, when they receive something, they think they're being loved. They think that's the definition of love. And for them, that's a fabricated definition, perhaps. That's why for me, there's a lot more to it than just those 5 languages type of thing. And I want to bring this concept back around to bonding, because you cannot bond with someone that you do not understand. You cannot bond with someone that you are not allowing to be who they are. And this will go back to your values. If you say, I have unconditional love for you, but you are not accepting them for who they are, there's going to be repulsion. Even if you're pretending that there's not, there is going to be. Energetically, physically, emotionally, and you will see the relationship deteriorate. But if you understand the deeper concept, the deeper understanding of what the individual believes or knows to be true for themselves, of what love is to them, and there is comprehension from one to the other, you can see how the needs can get met. So let's go back to love and defining what love is for the person. Because it's probably going to be different than the other person. And once you have that defined for one person, you can start bridging that gap. So the question would be, how do you solve that? How do you do that? And really it is communication. You get present. Your intention is to know what it is that, how will my child know that they are loved? That's an important question to ask. And when you're dealing with infants, that's a whole other thing, because our jobs as parents to parent an infant and a newborn, a child, a toddler, as they go, our job is to nurture them. Our job is to meet whatever needs before it gets to a situation where they're screaming and crying. There are needs, and our job is to be able to observe what their needs are and use the appropriate tool, rather than failing to observe, judging, making a judgment, making a false assumption, and then reacting, and then using a tool like spanking, or using a tool like timeout and sticking them in a corner. That is a disconnection, and that is diabolically opposed to a value that you just mentioned, which is connection. So how can we establish or bring in a tool that will enable us to be in alignment with our values and get our child's needs met and have our needs met? And that's where the bonding happens. So bonding comes back to the question, how do you know when your mother loves you? How do you know that your mom loves you? How do you know that your husband loves you? How do you know? And that is a deep question. So if you slap out this answer and say, well, he brings me flowers, that's how I know. I want you to look deeper. I want you to look inside you, not him. Look inside you. Because once you know you, you will know your child that much more. And that brings me then to work that we have to do on ourselves and our own inner child that may not have gotten their needs met. And when we parent now, this is a big piece that I talk about in my book, is that we tend to parent that inner child and try, so there's a lot of areas that come up around our own inner child's needs, and we confuse them with the child that's in front of us. And that stirs up some major turbulence and makes for not only a bumpy ride, but it takes us way off course. So that's another piece that we do. It's work that I do on private coaching. We do address it in the workshop, but in a group environment, it's a little bit harder. Sometimes we get some good stuff happening if we feel like we can go there. Because when we see someone else go through it and heal, we're all healing in the group. In that group environment, it's quite amazing, because it is definitely that type of energy. When you work in a group environment, there is a shift in everyone. You know, we're all experiencing that change together. All right, so does that kind of explain it? When you define love and you put that on your value shield, it's going to be very important that you really understand what love is to you both and to your family. And I would even go so far as make your own definition for it. What does it look like? What does it feel like when there is real love? When there is that depth of love, and what do you see? What is your experience of it? We're talking a very experiential type of thing. Because we can love our shoes, we can love cookies, but we're going a lot deeper here. We're doing the work that it takes to be magnificent parents, because our children are our future. And it's a big responsibility. And I'm still amazed that there are so many parents out there. Not very many pilots, comparatively, pilots, And there is no 6-month course on parenting. There's no flight instructor who takes you out and shows you the ropes before you have your child, and second child, and third, or whatever. You have to go and make it yourself. You have to go and create it. And I think that's one of the reasons Kim, with his book Simplicity Parenting, spoke to me so greatly. Because it was time for that change, and to shift into a more, I need to pilot my own life here, and I think I'm going to step off that assembly line and go over here, and I'm going to look at this path here. And I think that that's important for parents to know that it's okay to look for themselves and to think for themselves and to pilot their own lives. By all means, get support. That's why I'm here. By all means, create a village. By all means, go out and, experience and find out what works and what doesn't work for you, and then make an educated decision, So, in closing, as I lighten up things a little bit, when we come from that practicing presence, when we find our breath, and it's different for everybody. Sometimes practicing presence for me is playing my flute. And I will just sit there and play, and it releases a lot of tension. And my boys experience that. So find for yourself what helps you become more present. Check in with yourself throughout the day, with your breath. Look at your intention. Check out what your sacred intention is. I have a longer term intention. I have my homeschooling intention. I have different intentions for different hats that I wear. But they are clear so that I can course correct easily, or more easily. There's a lot of distractions. Being intentional helps release some of those distractions, which tends to move towards stress. If there is something you can do about something, do it. If there's something you cannot do about something, don't do it, but don't worry about it. Either way, do it or don't do it, stop worrying about it. That's another piece around stress. If you forgot you left the iron on, you're stressed out about it, call somebody and ask them to check. Or go back home and check the iron and turn it off. Make sure it's off, right? Instead of stressing about it. Then, listening from the place of your heart, laughing. It does feel better, and it's contagious. Laughter is contagious, and you'll see it in your children, and you'll see them smile and lighten up, and it's so much easier to come to that place of love and gratitude. Just instantaneously, I went in a moment of pure joy that I'm excited to see my boys when I get home and kiss them and love them. And that's the power of some of these little tools. The simplest things are sometimes the most powerful. So when we observe, when we notice without judging, we can make those changes that are the subtle changes that make the biggest difference. And when we know that there is a tool and a toolbox for ourselves that's unique to us, that's unique to each of our children, and we can teach our children that they have their own toolbox, that there is an ability within them to self-soothe. Do you know how much we will save in depression, in anxiety, in teen suicide? It is so important, and the work that I do comes about because I have known personally a family who lost their son because he didn't have some basic tools. And if I can help save one life, I've done something valuable with my life. I think that if you take home your value shield and work through that and implement that, that will make me greatly happy. But I think more so it will make you and your family greatly happy and lead you to a stress-free family. Thank you so much for being here.